Awesome. And we should be starting right now. And we are live. Perfect. Awesome. Moti, thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to go through a bit of the agenda today, what we're going to be discussing, what are some of the key takeaways. Obviously, introduce Moti and myself, and we'll start from there. Are you ready, Moti?
Yeah, great to be here.
Let's do it.
Thanks for having me.
100%. So, by attending this webinar, you're going to learn a bit more about Goldnest, how they transition from certain manual processes to fully automated systems using different technologies, IoT, AI, a modern UX design. We're going to explore different communication strategies to enhance that guest experience and obviously streamline the operations, get insights into building a sort of bespoke tech ecosystem with an overarching API and connecting these different tools together. So again, we're getting a bit into some of the technical components, and this is why I'm excited to bring Moti to the conversation, because we're also going to discuss the critical role of a CTO in a modern property management company and how investing in tech leadership, and I know you're not just a CTO, you're also the CMO, so we're going to discuss a bit of that, but how investing in someone who kind of spearheads your tech in your business is quite critical. I actually, just for context for everyone who's listening, ran a poll yesterday, and it's quite interesting to see the results. So just for context, 55% said, yes, we do think that we need a technologist or a CTO in our vacation rental management business. And then 45% said no. Now, when I look at the actual respondents and who said yes, who said no, there's a lot of tech companies that said no and a lot of vacation rental managers that said yes. So I wonder if the tech companies out there were a bit biased in terms of needing a technologist. And hopefully, Moti, you can shed some light on the importance of that. So this webinar is created for holiday rental specialists, operators, professional property managers. If you're managing multiple vacation rentals anywhere around the world, you are in the right place. And we're going to start off with an introduction from Moti, just for housekeeping items. Any questions that you guys have, feel free to ask them in the little question section on this platform. We will be running polls and so on. Go Goldnest, as David Blanc says, amen. But we'll answer those questions closer to the end of the webinar. So without further ado, Moti, do you want to give us a quick intro on who you are and what Goldnest is all about?
Sure. So let's start with Goldnest first. So Goldnest is a property management company, specializing in the short-term rental, vacation rental, based in Dallas. That's the headquarter. But we also, we're active in the Houston market and San Antonio, and actually adding more and more markets as we speak. I joined the team a year ago. But my history with Goldnest goes a little while back. They used to be my customer. We actually met a few years ago when they came for consultancy with regards to their investor portal. They wanted to develop a proprietary software for investor support, and I was, immediately very surprised. And that's what really ignited the conversation between us. A little bit about myself. From my academic background, I hold a computer science degree, and I started my career 25 years ago, mostly in the R&D field. I was, had technical roles, and as my career developed, I actually migrated or blended it with the product roles, leadership roles. I had a startup company for 6 years, in the social media area. And every now and every in between roles that I had, I used to give some consultancy on digital transformation. And this is how I met, actually, right before COVID. I had a conversation with Asher, our CEO and founder. And basically, as time went by, and I just realized that I got more familiar with Goldnest needs, I realized that there is really a good match between us and the team, and I just decided to join forces. So now I'm leading the technology in Goldnest and also the marketing. And it might sound a little bit funny because these are two very different roles, but at the same time, I would argue that there is a lot of common ground between them. I mean, you can't really do good marketing unless you really have a good technological infrastructure, especially if you want to do it during growth. And another element that really connected us together is the fact that Goldnest had experienced a very hyper growth during the last 3 years. And I think every business that reaches, and that to answer to the question about the role of CDO in the property management companies, I think that every growing business reaches the point where if the business wants to grow more than that, you start to basically rely on data and automations, right? Especially in a low margin industry or businesses where you really need to optimize processes and you really want to grow exponentially and not linearly. Yeah. And I think, we're probably going to, leave it to the later questions, but I think that without having a real technological background, it's a very deep moat to skip over, right? It's really holding you back, not knowing really what's the next stage or what the next step you need to take.
Yeah, and I actually want to touch up on, and by the way, I forgot to warn you, Moti, but I always take things off script. So even though we have some pre-built questions, this is going to be a conversation format. We're going to take it off script here. You said something really interesting, which is it's a low margin business. And I think what we see quite often is operators focus on the listing count. Number of listings is what's going to help me grow without thinking about, is it going to help me scale? Are my margins going to get better? And usually they don't actually get any better because there's lacking processes and structure and so on. We've seen this with quite a few businesses that we work with that manage 1,000 units. We started working with them at 500 and we saw the difference. And there is, a messier process as they get bigger. So I go to one of the core questions, which is many times founders don't necessarily have a tech background, but a distinct leadership is still uncommon. Like, does a hospitality company even need a CTO role? Does it make sense to have someone who's technology focused? I know I'm questioning your role here at Goldnest, so hopefully I'm not jeopardizing anything, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I wish we didn't have to have a CTO. My life would be much better and easier, to be honest. I think, well, the answer is definitely yes. I think that's my opinion, and I think that the proof for that is the actual challenges that I'm facing as a CEO of the company. So, just to give an example, right? So, we know that we've mentioned before that it's a low margin industry, right? And as you grow, you need to use some technology, right? You need information systems in place. If you want to, make sure collaboration is taking place, you want to make sure that information is flowing through the organization. And sometimes changing the technology you already adopted when you're small, migrating to a new tool requires a different skill set, right? You need to create or make a due diligence of the tool, right? But you need to also define your basic goals and where you want to take the organization in general, right? Because I would argue that if you don't bring the right questions to the table when you create or making a due diligence for a tool, you can just miss the entire action there, the result, and that will cost you so much. And in the low margin businesses, that's a mistake that you can't afford, right? So, so only from that aspect, I would say that a CTO main responsibility is to handle the transformation, the transit inside the organization of adopting new technology, implementing the technology correctly, not even mentioning, the challenging integration and engineering integrations between tools, which we're probably going to cover in a different. I have a sense that we're going to touch it on the different approaches that we have today between all-in-one systems versus integration between different systems.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, I do think that, you don't necessarily need a CTO per se, but having someone who's tech driven, who's the one who's kind of the visionary behind how all these dots connect, because there is technology out there. You do have a PMS, a channel manager, guest experience platforms, and so on. But being able to connect all the dots in the way that makes your business work is probably one of the more challenging pieces that not everyone thinks through really deeply. So
maybe to add to that, Francois,
yeah,
is the fact that at the end of the day, when you grow, in scale, and you try to, and you bring more people to organization, and you start to create some kind of hierarchy and management layers, you want to make sure that aside of providing the tools for the working hands and people that needs to do tasks every day, you also want to create dashboards. You want to create an overview of everything. And that brings it to another challenge: is what data am I going to collect, right? How and where I'm going to store it, right? How can I access it? What kind of tools I'm going to use, and what kind of reports and business intelligence I'm going to create on top of that. It's more than just having a tech-savvy person in your organization. It's somebody that really needs to understand, what can be done with data, and how can you support decisions with data.
100%. And I think all of that starts with laying down the KPIs. Oftentimes I'll speak with vacation rental managers who don't even know what KPIs really stand for. So for those of you who are in the audience, it's totally fine. It defines as key performance indicators. And one of the recommendations I make, we do this at Endzone. I've found it to be, well, it's just, you see the numbers and it changes completely once you take this approach. So the proof's in the pudding. And we associated 5 core KPIs to every single department, not more. Every time, you start doing this exercise, you want to add, but what if we track this? And what if we track that? And you start having too many KPIs, and the message that you're trying to get through of where the health of the business starts to lose sense.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to see what your KPIs are, but we can kind of dive into that later in the call. Now, on our prep call, you shared an interesting take on company growth and technology. You said it's a journey and that there's always a gap between where we were, where we are, and where we want to be as a tech-enabled business. So the changing needs, effectively, of a vacation rental management business. So can you elaborate maybe a bit more on the vision of Goldnest, as was where you guys were a couple of years ago and where you've been, where you are today, and where you're headed?
Sure. So when I met the team at Goldnest a few years ago, our portfolio size was about 30 properties, right? Since then, we grew up, I would argue in 100%. We are now managing 200 properties. No. Also in different markets. So that brings another, we used to be only in Dallas area. Now we're, acting in different markets. So there are, from operational point of view, there is a challenge, managing teams remotely and making sure that are all aligned under the same, eventually under the same KPIs that the organization manages. And one point with regards to KPIs, I would argue that one of the things that you need to understand before you set your KPIs is to basically define which KPIs are the leading KPIs and which ones are the lagging KPIs. Most of the times, the lagging KPIs are the most business-wise are the most important ones, right? So the leading KPIs can be number of leads that you get. Lagging KPI can be the net profit for each month, right? So it takes time and to measure KPI. It takes time before you see the effect on the lagging KPIs, which are most important, right? So you need to plan it correctly. You need to understand which KPIs you want to put in place at the beginning on the low level in order to be able to predict what's going to be the impact on the lagging KPIs. So that's another, I would say, interesting aspect when it comes to adopting technology and designing the technological stack and processes, by the way, right? I don't think you can actually, succeed with technology if you don't have a really good sense of how to design processes and protocols within the organization. Are you familiar with Conway's law, by the way? Have you heard about Conway?
No, I'm not. No, I don't know.
So that's a very really interesting law. I think the guy the law was actually established in the 70s, right? I think in 1967.
I
And
wasn't there yet.
yeah, both of us. Luckily, both of us. So I think that the main statement there in the law, actually says that the way the company is structured and communicates, basically at the end of the day, will shape the way it will shape the systems that it actually designs, right? So most of companies really rely on the thought that once they will come across a nice technology, an interesting technology, that will lead the way to a digital transformation for them. And I would argue that it's actually the other way around, right? So first of all, you really need to design this and the structure of the organization, and then try to find the technology that will fit the structure, right?
Yeah.
And that's I think a common mistake that most of companies doing at the end of the day. They see a really cool tool and they say, okay, let's adopt that, and now let's try to make everything work around this tool, when the real purpose is actually to design how the organization should work, what teams we're going to put in place, how do we see responsibilities and functions within the organization, and then try to build a tech stack and integrations between those technological elements to support the structure. And I think that's the key for success when it comes to digital transformation.
It's true. I do see quite a lot of property managers who use or buy technology without really thinking through how this affects their current operations, and thinking that it'll just kind of match itself, or they'll adapt to whatever the technology has, when it's not always the best approach effectively for the business. So I have seen this quite a bit of time. I actually see it as well with us at Enzo. We've done a few things that may not necessarily be natural per se, but have helped us with cash flow and just being as profitable as we can be. And it's not the standard way, but it works. And one example, just to be more concrete, HubSpot. We use HubSpot as our CRM. So if you've ever gotten emails from us reaching out about how we can help you with Enzo and so on, those emails are coming out of HubSpot. But when we send proposals, we send them from a completely different tool, because it met the standards that we wanted in terms of sharing information and interactiveness and so on. Yeah. But then it ended up creating a change in how we report for accounting and so on. So we had to adapt to Zapier and Excel and so on, which ultimately some people may say, well, why don't you just use the HubSpot quote system? Because it doesn't fit exactly what we wanted to be able to do for our clients and prospects and so on. So being able to effectively define what your business structure looks like and then getting technology to adapt to it is probably the best bet in terms of building a successful vacation rental business. I fully agree with that. We are going to talk about sort of the differences between the all-in-one, the point-based solutions, the building in-house as well, and all that. I know it's a fiery debate. I've had this conversation with quite a few people who agree or disagree. Yeah. But before we jump into that, how do you evaluate technology? I know we went through a diligence process, and it was a bit lengthier than I would expect from most vacation rental managers, but it was actually good because you guys asked all the questions you need ahead of time, so there aren't any surprises. So can you share a bit more about those actionable steps that you guys take when evaluating technology needed for growth?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say that before we actually adopt any new technology, we ask ourselves, okay, how are we going to use, what problem that this technology is solving, right? Does it fit the list of problems that we want to solve within the organization? Then we ask, how open is that system is, right? Do we have integration capabilities? Can we pull data from that system and integrate it with the other systems, creating an overview, and try to create cross-references between systems? Because at the end of the day, it's really important to understand, and I think this is another challenge, and another reason why you need some information technology background, right? You need to decide for each system is it playing a role of being a source of truth for something in the organization, right? And so once you establish which system is the source of truth of what, then you create your own system of record, relying on that system, right? You really want to make sure that when it comes to smart locks, for example, where do you want to get your information, right? Do I get it from Answer Connect? Do I get it straight from the locks companies and the products that they're providing? Can I rely on Guesty when it comes to my portfolio sites? Or do I need to create a separate database that will reflect my portfolio? And Guesty will serve as a listing source of truth, right? Because for an example, one of the things we realized when we try to rely on Guesty when we build the investor portal is that sometimes we have the same property under different listings. So if I pull the listings from Guesty, if I want to pull all the listings from Guesty, I will get all the actual active, even sometimes non-active, or we sometimes due to technical reasons, we have to keep two different listings for the same house as active. Migrating from one to the other, but in between there is a limbo state where both of them are active, right? Yeah. So you need to pull information from both two different entities and try to combine them together. And it doesn't really work well when you try to build a database of houses where there is only one core entity, only one house in one address, right? So one of the things that we did is actually it actually was one of the main and most earlier tasks that I did in the company is try to establish that database, okay? Try to establish a database of houses. And then we, on top of that and around that, build all the entire processes because everything was fed by this source of truth. That was the only source of truth of the portfolio in the company. And that really opened the gate for other technologies and other system of records to communicate. So to answer your question, I think that openness and integration capabilities is very, very, very important. And then there is obviously the price, right? Because the price and the business model. Because if you want to scale up, you really want to ask yourself, okay, now it makes sense. But when I will grow, like when I will add 200 more houses, will it still be, a reasonable amount to spend? Is it a marginal, or is it like a fixed price that I have to pay per house? Do I have tiers? Do I have to, do I have to buy? Do I have to jump to a different tier? And that changes the cost. Yeah. Right? All those considerations are very important, but from functionality perspective, I would say that integration and understanding the problem that the tool is actually trying to solve and how well it is being, dealt.
100%. And I think that's very clear with two things. For those of you who are watching this webinar, if you're thinking, well, how do I get started with connectivity? What does that mean? And, how do I know if I have the right systems from a connectivity standpoint? What I urge you to do is check if the company has an API. Now, whether it's a closed API or an open API, that's the prerogative of the company, and that's totally fine. That could be for security reasons. It could be for growth reasons, whatever that is. And then look at the structure of that API and see how have they kind of, built out their information. I know I'm saying some more complicated words here than needs to be. All I'm saying is, do they have listings, bookings, messages, guests, all the key elements that structure your business? Is there an API endpoint that you can call? There may be missing something, but if there's that sort of high level structure, then you'll be able to connect certain systems together. That's one way to see it. The other thing is to ask your tech provider is if they use webhooks. I'm surprised by the amount of companies that deal with rapid, urgent, last minute, need the data now, and still send their data via carrier pigeons. They don't actually send them via carrier pigeons, but it's basically the same kind of latency. So webhooks is just a system where it's a shake of hands between two systems that allows information to pass very quickly. This is really helpful when you're doing reports or anything like that. So you guys have built a pretty robust. Go ahead, Moti.
No, I'm just saying that coming from my technical background, I would say that webhooks are great. I mean, this is like
Yeah.
Creating an event-based processes in real time, that's amazing. I would argue that, and this is something that would be a great addition to the webhooks, having an open API and really effective open API, like Guesty, for example, right?
Yeah.
Really helps to, because sometimes, due to communication issues and security issues, webhooks are not the entire package. Sometimes you want to create a backup process, especially if it's a very important information that you need to pull on a very high frequency, in high frequency, right? So you want to back it up with API calls every now and then, just pull all the data and compare it to the data that you receive from the webhooks.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair point. And there's going to be, if anything, more information. It's also easier to set up than if you're having to set up manual webhooks for every data point that you need. So I agree with that. So you guys have built a pretty robust tech system here now at Goldnest, and you're keeping the magic of hospitality. I mean, it's still the bread and the essence of Goldnest. Where do you stand? Well, before we dive into this, tell us a bit more about that personal touch and how you manage technology with personal touch. What does that look like?
Well, it's a good question. I would say that, before, since it's a journey, right? We do it step by step. There is a lot of aspects to creating this digital transformation and migrating to new systems, and then try to evaluate the ecosystem and pick and choose which tools you want to work with. So I would, and there is also the mindset of the organization, right? It needs to be actually embedded within the culture, and that's another transition, another change management that you need to do. And so what we usually do is we try to create a proof of concept for something. We try to use, sometimes, I wouldn't say less professional tools, but I would say more immediate and less scalable tools to be able to, set let's say, to create the buy-in from stakeholders that this is the right way we want to do. Again, we want to make sure that before we adopt the tool, we have the structure, the company structure, the team structure in place, and then the team is actually bought in to the idea of adopting this kind of tool to do this and that. For example, we've developed a very basic review management app within the company, right? So we want to make sure that we follow reviews. We want to make sure we answer and we mitigate bad reviews in time. We don't postpone that. We don't wait till our superhost rank will drop below the threshold. And we didn't have a really good tool. The team used Excel sheets, and it's a copy paste type of actions, and information got lost, and there was no really management overview and control over the process. It was we have shifts, and every shift just passes the responsibility and the torch to the next one, and sometimes things get lost in the way. There were many cases where we actually missed some information within the reviews. Reviews are a great source for improvements. You get a lot of information from guests, especially guests that leave you 5-star reviews, but at the private section, they leave you some tips. Listen, this and that happened, or the something is broken in the kitchen. You better and when you don't have a really good process in place, then you actually miss that information. So what we try to do is create a case that first of all, we have a tool to pull all the information to one system. We've created a dashboard. We've created permissions and roles within that tool. And then we try to create some kind of processes where when the review management team encounters an issue, it immediately sends an alert to the coordinators and the maintenance team, right, to be aware of that. And that actually triggered an entire conversation within the organization. Which tools do we need right now? Okay, which kind of protocols and communication protocols we need to put in place, so we will be able to do that. And then once you have that in place, it's really easy to go and say, okay, let's research the market and let's find the best tool that can give us that capabilities.
Yeah.
So that's the personal touch, I would say. We also, we try to, and back to the questions, how do we pick and choose technology to the company?
Yeah.
I think it's very connected to that as well. Because, and I've heard in early webinars that it actually was it's a very interesting topic that you guys discuss is, do you want to take something very, very granular that does only one thing and that does it really well, or do you want to take something that is really taking care of everything?
Yeah.
And to be honest, our opinion is that we much more, let's say, afraid, or not afraid, maybe it's not the right word, but we're reluctant to take something that controls everything, because then you're hooked in one system and one system only.
Yeah.
And I would prefer to take, reasonable scopes of, solutions that are managing a reasonable scope, and try to see how I connect everything together. And that will give me, I think, will give at the end of the day a better control of what happens in the, how do you manage and you connect everything together.
That's interesting. It's the ongoing debate in the industry, especially as you have property management systems that have pitched themselves as being an all-in-one solution, yet having one of the biggest marketplaces in the industry as well. So a bit of a paradox in that aspect. And I think I personally think there's a balance between the two, where there's certain systems that are core. Whatever's handling your distribution, for example, needs to understand everything about your listings, the revenue, the taxation, all the details that come with pushing that information to the relevant channels. But then when you get into operations, maintenance, guest experience, guest verification, and so on, this is where things can get a bit more flexible based on the processes that you have. Now, I do talk about this with a bias, obviously, being a guest experience platform in the industry. But I also see it just from the market, where some of the PMSs where we have overlap, where they've started moving into guest experience and so on, clients will still choose individual systems over relying everything on one. And do you think it has to do with potentially the migrating risk, the reason why you don't necessarily like having everything in one place? Or what are the other challenges? What's the reason why not having one system that does everything and call it a day?
So I think, coming from product management discipline, I would say that you really want to go with tools that understand the problem thoroughly, right? And don't attempt to solve things that are not related to the main problem, the main mission that they chose originally. And I think it really goes and proved right with startup companies, right? You see that there's startup companies that are trying to do, many things and have don't really practice focus and try to solve very specific problems will tend to disappear at some point.
Yeah.
And for example, let's take Enzo Connect, right? So you guys, the reason we came across Enzo Connect from the beginning was the fact that we started to get complaints from guests about, problems with the smart locks, right? So we have guests coming in, trying to make the check-in, and they realize that they don't have the lock is not the code that they have for the lock is not working, right? It's not correct. Yeah. And then there is a whole bunch of communication with the guest communication department and customer support to provide them with a different. But even if you solve the problem at the end of the day, the experience was ruined for the guests, right?
Yeah.
So that was the angle that started the research and the journey after a different solution that we had in place. And then we came across Enzo Connect. And so the conversation started about locks, but immediately we realized that you guys decided to take a much more holistic approach with it, right? Because the locks is only one stage within the boarding, right? The boarding experience and the touchless and automatic check-in process, right? And then during stay, you have all those, upsells and different other features that actually support the guest experience during the stay, and then post checkout, right? So that gave us, first of all, I think it gave us the idea that you guys are really expert at what you do. You understand the industry, and you understand the niche, and you understand the problem that you're trying to solve. And that creates a lot of, and at the same time, you integrate well with the ecosystem that will allow us to mix and match, right? We can rely on the data that you provide us, but send it to a different. We don't have to use your marketing tools, although they're pretty cool. But I would argue that if we already have a different marketing tool in place, we can just pull information, just send it over, and that will not risk or force us to change the entire stack that we already developed there. And that's really, really important, I think. It also, I think it's actually support the idea that you guys understand the guest mostly, right? You put the guest in center. So no matter which direction you're going to take and how you're going to develop in the future, you will keep, you'll be, let's say, loyal to that idea. And that's good, because that gives us a lot of peace of mind that you guys know what you're doing. And I would say that another, back to a previous question, because I'm just reminding the process you guys and us went through, is that one of the things you want to make sure before you actually commit to a certain solution is to understand what's the financial background of that company, right? I think it came during our initial conversations. You don't want to bet on a very cool and high, company that doesn't really have any
runs out of money,
trying to disappear tomorrow, and the entire migration process will go down the tube. So I think that's another aspect you need to add to that.
And that one's a tough one, because most companies, especially startups, they're always going to beef themselves up and say they're fine, et cetera. But I think there's a few things you can ask a company is either, what's your runway, what's your burn, anything along those lines, which I think is some of the questions you guys asked us. Will give you a good sense of how long this company has, and if it's a good long-term partner, or if this may be too risky to fully migrate and so on. That's a catch-22 problem, I want to say, because as having started this with absolutely nothing, with 20 grand to land your first client, you do have to, have someone who trusts you. But once you land larger customers that maybe, you don't want to create too much risk, then having that strong financial performance is also really important. Migrating systems is difficult. It's not an easy thing. And I think we see it specifically when people switch from one PMS to another. We actually had to build a whole module in Enzo Connect so people could reconnect their PMS themselves, because we had so many requests of people changing from one to another. And you're basically saying, hey, let me unplug my entire business for a while and replug it right here. And in the meantime, something can go wrong. And we're talking about like the core pipes that connect to the heart of your business. But as you go further into other technology stacks, you're also affecting those different aspects, the guest experience, the maintenance, the coordination with different team members, whatever it might be. Change is difficult, but it's sometimes necessary. So obviously very happy that you guys made a change. And for those of you who are in the audience, yes, our focus is exclusively on the guest experience. So going back to that subject of KPIs, and we're constantly revisiting our KPIs, by the way, but we set some about 5 months ago, which really helped not getting new customers, but making our existing customers happy or happier. And we changed technology's KPIs of, did you hit your sprint? Did you finish the tasks you said you were going to do? To how much revenue did we generate for our clients? How much time did we save them on XYZ process? How many workflows are they building on average? Are we sticky enough? And so we start looking at what is our core value and how do we translate that back into a KPI for one of the departments to kind of lead. And I urge people in the vacation rental management business to do kind of the same thing with their different teams. So if you're a 2, 3, 4 person team and you're kind of running a lot of different things, start high level. Start with the key things. Is it reviews? Is it your ADR? Is it your occupancy rates? Whatever the main things that are going to sort of dictate the financial health of your business. And then when you get bigger, because what's the team size right now for Goldnest? How many people are you?
Roughly? So Currently, we have between 40 to 50 people, right? So I would say,
Right.
and I think the other challenge, or maybe unique circumstances that we have in Gold is that we actually have, uh, you know, different time zones. So we have a team in the two teams in the Philippines. We have one team in Brazil.
Yep.
We have offices in Canada, right next across the street from where you sit. We have an office in Tel Aviv, and we have one in Dallas, right? And we also have in Houston and San Antonio. So you really, I think that's that adds to the challenges and the overall considerations when we choose technology as well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now I know I think we could have this conversation for quite some time, Moti. I think I'm gonna have to come visit you so we can just grab coffee and do it like Lex Friedman style instead. But you mentioned that you were CTO, but you also mentioned that you were a CMO, and I think there's quite a few people I'm seeing in the webinar that might come from a marketing background. So can you maybe share a bit more how that collaboration between tech and marketing, revenue distribution, and so on has worked for you? Maybe focusing a bit more on the tech and marketing. And specifically what you said, right? We have a little marketing system within Enzo. We still promote it as beta. We don't like pushing it too much. And we recently did a push to actually export data to any system. So HubSpot, Salesforce, MailChimp, whatever you want. And that's because we're not going to rebuild the wheel. Like there's already fantastic email marketing systems out there that aren't going to charge you more. It's going to be very cheap, if anything. So how have you found that or bridged that gap between tech and marketing?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I would say that we are more advanced in the technological area than the marketing. We're just doing our, let's say, not the first steps, but we're definitely in an early stage when it comes to marketing. We've just we just increased the marketing team, and we are trying to work on setting the marketing strategy for next year, which is something that we didn't really do up until now. So this is something that, and I would argue that it is all connected, because the process that we're trying to do now, again, going back to the fact that you need to define your organizational structure. Before you do that, you really need to set a business strategy and a set of business goals, right? And that will define your marketing strategy, right? So I think that for the first time in Goldnest, we're actually building a strategy from top down, defining really, really clear marketing and business goals, and trying to work it down and break it, do a reverse engineering to what is really need to be KPIs and even content planning, which kind of content we want to produce in order to support those KPIs. And right now, I think that the two things are really, really connected. When you say that, let's say you have a set of KPIs that you want to support from the business side, and then you ask yourself, okay, when you break it down, you say, okay, these are the marketing KPIs that I need to support.
Right.
You really you start to realize, okay, I need more data and I need more tools to do that. And I think that be effective in marketing really requires not just technology, but also good data and being able to create or support decisions with data. And so right now, I think the main challenge is to redesign or recreate the infrastructure to support that, and then double down on marketing, and then you can go and spend more on advertising, understanding which campaigns you want to set, understanding which target audiences we're actually focusing on, and do the A/B testing, and refine until you get more and more effective marketing operation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, starting with the data just gives you an indication of where to put your money so that you're not wasting money on things that actually might not be relevant, might feel like they're relevant for you, but aren't actually relevant for your clients. And one thing I would add to everyone, we did do a presentation with Will from Altito at the Scale Barcelona conference on scheduled touch points and mediums. So when and how to communicate with your guests. And these are great opportunities to collect additional data. Sending a form to a guest is one way to collect it, but throughout their stay, there's other means of collecting more information about that guest. So stay tuned. We just launched our newsletter, and I think there's a section on that in there. Now, just for the sake of time, we are going to shift away from the CTO, the technology, the marketing. Well, we're going to stay in the technology because I get excited about these parts. But let's talk about the emerging tech. There's a lot of new technologies that are coming out, some good, some bad, some of the evil. There's a lot of changes happening on, I want to say, a global scale of some of the pillar companies that we know, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Metas, and so on, and being disrupted with AI to a point where I would almost call this the AI revolution, just like we had the Industrial Revolution. And as much as some people may smile and laugh right now and think, oh, you're crazy, this is just a bunch of geeks and nerds playing around with large language models, we are starting to see the effects of this in every single industry. So what do you think is the most impactful or significant impact on the industry from a tech perspective in the next 5 to 10 years? What and how?
Yeah, so first of all, AI, for sure. I mean, AI plays a significant role in the way the industry is going to, I think, will change in the next few years. And in so many aspects. I mean, AI is integrating in everything that we do right now. Even, we mentioned that the process starts with, I would argue that the first technology that you really want to use when you do the transition is ChatGPT. Okay? Because having a conversation with ChatGPT about how you want to build your structure, build the structure of the company, right? What kind of interfaces you think should be, even though ChatGPT will not give you the last word on this, it will trigger the conversation. It will give you enough, I would argue, a set of opportunities or ideas of how you should, build the structure of the company. And then you have all kinds of, I would call them mid-tech solutions, right? You can use AI, for example. I'll give you an interesting example. When we and it's a very small, aspect in the operation, but it's very interesting. So when you get bad reviews in Airbnb, right? You have the mitigation process. You can just create a dispute request. One of the things that we did is that we actually pulled all the
The bad reviews
policy,
and the good reviews.
we took all the policies. We took the policies, Airbnb policies, right, and we just fed it to the ChatGPT, to the GPT bot. And whenever we get a bad review, we actually build a case by asking ChatGPT to provide us a whole legal arguments based on the policy. What should we say in order to dispute?
I love that.
Right. So that's like a very interesting, a very small angle of how AI can drive the conversation. Right. So it makes you much better in doing your tasks. Another example that I gave you, I think, in our prep call, is that we use AI in integrations. Right. When we need to connect two different systems, but they don't really connect directly, you need to change the data. You need to build, or the data structure needs to be modified to fit the other system. So we just use AI in between. Zapier has this really interesting module for that. We use AI to drive insights from reviews and build an issue list for us. And obviously, pricing, dynamic pricing, optimize occupancy. There are so many cases where AI can play a role in it, in the industry, and boost your operation, make everything more efficient and less time consuming. Right? And that's, I think, at the end of the day, where the big revolution will take place. From marketing perspective, I would say that we're still trying to evaluate the impact of the new changes in Google, right? So you worked really hard to build your SEO assets, and you try to be, play nicely with Google's requirements, and then in one day they change the entire, they pull the rug under your feet, and you have to readapt. So to be honest, right now we're in a huge dilemma on how we should continue with our SEO efforts. So that's another aspect that's probably going to disrupt the industry in general.
The
Not
concept of search effectively. Because
yeah,
that is being changed. I see it within even my own behavior where, you know how you have your four little apps at the bottom of an iPhone and they're probably the same. Even if you upgraded iPhones over the course of the years, you always have those four apps. Mine used to be phone, message, Chrome, Spotify. Those are like my four baseline apps I'm always going to use. And recently I made the conscious effort of switching that Chrome out and putting the ChatGPT. And so muscle memory, whenever I'm looking to search something, I end up opening the ChatGPT app and I'm like, that's not what I wanted. But then I think to myself, well, let me see if it is. And I start using it. And now it's starting to become more natural where I'm not reading someone's blog post where they have 6 calls to actions anymore. I'm getting the information that I need in one sentence from OpenAI that's aggregating all of this. Now, it's not always accurate. Don't get me wrong. And there are still a lot of improvements to be made. I think I recently saw something about
it's only a matter of
ChatGPT, or
time.
maybe it was, that's the
It's
thing, right?
improving
It's a matter of time. Yeah. Yeah. There's a quote from Sam Altman that says, if you believe that the rate of trajectory of innovation of OpenAI, if you believe in that rate of trajectory, then you shouldn't be trying to improve the models themselves. You should just let them do that. And you should build the framework around their system so that when the improvements happen, your system is just going to get better.
Yeah.
We've started working with some of the new models, and my goodness, it's night and day what we can achieve from a predictive response and so on. Between 3 that will hallucinate 60% of the time, and then you drop it down to 30%, and you keep evolving as you go. So these are the kind of improvements that you want to focus on. I love that. I love that. Do you think it's a buzzword right now? Do you think that there's a risk in the? What are your thoughts on that?
The risk is there for sure. I think it's
Yeah.
with power comes responsibility, and I think the responsibility part is still negotiated. Right.
Yeah.
I watched Sam Harris podcast a few days ago, and he talked about the back in the I think in the 70s or the 80s or the early 2000s, where they spoke about the when AI actually within when it was hidden from the public, it was still in very close labs. And there was an ethic committee that spoke about the moment when they would reach the point where AI would be so advanced that they would have to take a decision whether or not to connect it to the web. Right? That was like the main big concern back in the days. And he said we passed that point without even noticing. Right? So now there is no going back, and I think it just reflects how easy we are on monitoring and trying to be responsible with AI. But at the same time, I think it's a great tool for now. I think I started with a few ChatGPT conversations here and there, like every few days, and now I'm using ChatGPT dozens of times every hour. Each hour. I'm just, everything goes through ChatGPT. And I think it will just only evolve as we go. Obviously, the speed, the adoption rate of that technology is amazing. It's unbelievable. I mean, when I try to, there are certain hours right now when you try to use ChatGPT, when, mainly morning time in the US, where you start to see that ChatGPT just doesn't work because it's too overloaded. Everybody's using ChatGPT, and you can actually see when people are waking up and starting using the AI. But I would say that alongside AI or with AI, with the help of AI, IoT is another technological group of technological solutions that will keep changing the industry. I think that IoT combined with AI has a great potential, right, in changing the industry and disrupting the industry as we go.
Yeah, and for context, for those of you who joined, IoT is Internet of Things, so that's going to be your smart devices. Now, do you have any examples of what you think on the IoT side it would look like? Because I know there a few years back, you guys, everyone who's in the webinar, you might be thinking, well, there's dozens of smart lock companies out there. I've heard these things like, well, one is Wi-Fi. Another company told me they're not Wi-Fi. They're different things. Zigbee, Zigwave. I'm not making these words up. These are real words. Bluetooth, that one you may have heard of. And so why is all this mess? And for context, there was a bit of a race in terms of who wanted to build the system, the smart device system that would control all of the other smart device systems. At the end of the day, every tech company, it's a data play. And with the thought that without the thinking that Wi-Fi would just get better. And Wi-Fi did get better. We started getting 5G and so on. And so now the recommended protocols are just Wi-Fi. Get a Wi-Fi lock and call it a day. But other than smart locks, where do you see the IoT space growing? Because as Wi-Fi is getting better, now I can connect my doorbell. I can connect my smart lamps. I can connect my, any device realistically. Where do you see IoT in the hospitality space specifically evolving past smart devices?
Yeah.
Or is it within smart devices? Smart locks, sorry.
Whether it's Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, I think, I mean, Bluetooth also, there were some major development on the Bluetooth area
Yes,
as well lately.
true.
So I think,
we just don't support it. That's why I didn't bring it up. But
yeah, no, I used to work in a tech company where you really had it was also based on IoT devices, but in environments with low connectivity, right? So if you don't have or zero connectivity, right? So if that's the challenge, you want to make sure that you're using Bluetooth instead of Wi-Fi, right? So not necessarily something that is relevant for the property management industry, but there are advantages for each communication protocol for sure from the technical side. I think that IoT in general, talking about guest experience, right, and in marketing or seamless marketing, right? You want to, and again, there is a lot of privacy issues that you need to solve there, but I mean, creating an experience where you don't really need to push anything. Everything is being predicted for you. Everything is being activated from remote. For example, we are now in the process of evaluating companies with sprinklers and controlling sprinklers and other devices within the maintenance area, right? Is very important. Also, monitoring activity of teams, performances of teams, trying to remotely solve issues, right? All of those cases. I mean, COVID was a great experience and a great example. I think that you couldn't send teams to do anything, right? You were really coordinates were put a very strong limitation on access to devices, access to properties, and if you have IoT devices you can control remotely, that's a great advance and a great let's say experience for you, and it can at the end of the day improve the guest experience.
Yeah, it's finding the
costs, right? It's going to save you. If you don't have to send a person to do something, you can do it from from your mobile phone as you go. That will be a very efficient process.
Absolutely. There's an operational play, there's a cost play, and then there's also an experience play. I've been working on a pilot project up north in Canada in a few cabins where we're trying to see if it's possible for us to create this experience where guest checks in and the blinds go up and the lights dim in and all of this sort of predictive futuristic approach that is coming, and it's coming soon. So why not be that software that can help with those things? This is really interesting. Now, before we close off the webinar, because I know we're running a bit low on time here, and we are going to open it up for questions. So start typing your questions now. I just want to talk about the last thing is tech stack, centralizing all of this data. I believe Sasha on my team will be popping up the technology stack that you guys are using so that people can see kind of what is out there. So this is and we are going to send a show notes after so everyone can get a copy of this if Moti and the team are fine with it. This gives you kind of an idea of all the different tools that Goldnest uses and split with different categories: CRM, accounting, routing, security, document management, pricing optimization. At the end of the day, you realize that there is a lot of technology that you need to run a business. I know people don't count their email as part of the technology stack, but guess what? It's another piece that you have to pay. If you have Google Suite, it's $7.89 Canadian dollars per user, apparently. I just know because we get a bill every month that's pretty high. So can you tell us a bit, one quick question around where do you centralize all this information and how you think about data warehousing?
Yeah, so we definitely have, really high ambitions when it comes to data warehouse. I think that currently we use Google technology mostly, the Google ecosystem for that.
Yeah.
We use Firestore as a cloud database. Most of our, core data is stored there. We also use Google Drive for file storage, and we have plenty of, cases where we use Google Sheets as databases, and
Yep.
we build custom apps with AppSheet based on the Google Sheet, Google Sheet as a database behind the scenes. We find it very that approach gave us a lot of flexibility when it comes to develop proof of concept for processes, right? So it's a very easy and fast environment to wrap something really, really quickly and test it.
Yeah.
And one quick note about that, one of the things that we did, talking about the necessity of a CTO, is that we've created a new team called Goldnest Lab, right? So Goldnest Lab is a new group within Goldnest where we actually one of our employee which had a technological background started to work directly with me on building those proof of concepts, right? So we use low code tools and we try to keep everything very, very, let's say, fast and flexible, just to make sure that we release apps and process and tools to test processes within the company. And once they're matured enough, then we go and we look for a better or a more robust solution for them.
That makes sense. That makes sense. We're going to be sending out at the end of this webinar a quick review of this tech stack, as well as a document for you guys to play around and think through what your tech stack looks like as well. So start filling in, these different aspects. What are you using for email marketing? How do you categorize hospitality management? What do you have for security and so on? So as you start thinking about building your technology stack, or if you already have one and you're thinking about evolving it, again, our focus at Enzo Connect is the guest experience. So we just focus on increasing revenue per guest, creating more time-saving efficiencies, and creating more 5-star bookings. Other platforms in here are doing fantastic things like Rentals United, channel distribution, getting you on more places, more visibility, Guesty, centralizing all of those listings, all of that data, so that you can, do that distribution and do that guest experience and so on. So this is a really helpful view of how you guys run Goldnest. I appreciate you filling this in, Moti. Now, without further ado, I know we are. Oh, go ahead.
No, my pleasure. I'm just saying.
Yeah. We're gonna slowly cut off the webinar here, but I do want to open it up for questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat or in the question section at the right-hand side. And then we also sent out a little poll for you guys to fill in whenever you want. Any closing remarks, Moti? What's the best way for people to reach out to Goldnest to learn more? I see there's already someone looking to potentially add 10 units to the Texas side of the business. So what are the different ways of reaching out, either as a property manager or as someone who's trying to add more units to the Goldnest ecosystem?
Yeah, just go to goldnest.co and right in the front page you'll find a form. Send us and we'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Love it. Any last comments or remarks that you want to share with the audience today?
Just take it step by step. Be very, focus on the problems that you want to solve. Don't jump into, adopting technologies just because they're there. And try to follow your truth. Try to understand which size of company you really want to be. I mean, what's the size? Because technological stack and building systems is a very unique or individual process. You need to fit. You need to make sure there's a good fit to your DNA as a company.
Yeah, I think that's the careful balance between capital efficient businesses and growth focused businesses. We see it as well in the startup ecosystem with what kind of happened with venture capital money and so on, where a lot of growth focused businesses didn't necessarily have the capital to sustain. So fine, I think the balance, like what's your North Star? Do you want to be a 500 listing property manager, or are you happy being a 50 unit property manager, but focused on a very special segment and so on? So this is good advice. I appreciate your time, Moti. It doesn't seem like we have any. Oh, no, we might have a. Oh, I love it. Joachim just shared his tech stack as well. So feel free to check out the document there that Joachim shared. I'll send you a message, Joachim, if we can share it publicly as well as part of our recap, our show notes. Thanks for joining. Joachim is a property manager in the Nordics, Sweden. So good to see you here. And let's go from here. Moti, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.